All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the Devstream 139 breakdown. So, on today's Devstream, they basically went over the mainline that they just released. So, we're going to be covering that whole thing in this video as well because it's pretty much what the Devstream was about. So here on the left, I have the actual mainline notes, and on the right, I have the just general important bits more so than anything else from the Devstream to go over that I definitely want to touch on. So before that, though, we do have this nice index of things that they talked about. I want to touch on a couple things before we get into armor, health, and shield changes. Basically, Railjack onboarding changes and Railjack bug fixes. They're not doing any big sweeping changes to Railjack as of now, it seems, and that's very unfortunate because I feel like that's what Railjack really needs. But in terms of onboarding changes, they're making it considerably easier to actually build a Railjack. They're lowering the credits from 6 million to 600,000, for example. And anyone who has built their Railjack already is going to be getting a refund of those resources and also a couple of the repair drones as well. So if you already built your Railjack, you're going to get a refund of a bunch of materials that you can look forward to. And if you haven't, it's going to be much easier to build a Railjack. Not that there's any really great reason to build a Railjack because the content is not great in my opinion. Hopefully we get some fixes for that fairly soon and Railjack can be a lot more fun. Moving on though. Let's talk about this armor, health, and shield business because a lot is changing here, and it's a ton of changes. It's a lot of things. We're just first and foremost going to talk about how armor and all that is going to be changing. So before, armor, shields, and health are on an exponential curve. That's everything. Afterward, armor, shields, and health are on an S curve. And what it means for it to be on an S curve is essentially that instead of gaining more and more armor and everything just like spiking up and going crazy the higher the level gets, and armor becoming like a impossible thing to deal with unless you are specifically building for dealing with only armor. Instead, it is going to curve as it does now up to about level 75, and then the curve is going to get like way slower. Enemies are going to gain stats much more slowly than they do now, and it is basically going to result in armor being way less important overall in terms of enemies. Along with that, enemies are going to be getting more shields, and corpus enemies are going to be getting shield gates, which we'll go into more depth in a second on that, because of course it's its own section. But the basic gist on that is that we're getting shield gates, enemies are getting shield gates. Enemy shield gates have a specific difference where there is a 5% of your damage spillover that can still just kill them and they won't have their gate activate. And if you hit a weak point, their gate won't activate and it will just kill them. But for us, we have just general shield gating on all of the Warframes, and it seems to be very similar to the way Hildren has her gating now, which we'll talk about more in the shield gating section. In general, armor changes, going to be a nerf to armor, which is good. That's probably been a needed thing for a while. But the main thing that they tried to get across is that shields are going to become more important, and then they also said that health is going to go up. Health going up, even if armor comes down, if health goes up enough, that would mean that these tough enemies are going to be basically just as tough, but we'll have to see like where the health shakes out. They didn't touch on that part too much. Along with that, there are some damage type changes against shields in that slash status does not bypass shields anymore. It still bypasses armor, but will no longer bypass shields, and will instead just deal the damage to the shields as it would. This means that slash damage is still hyper effective against armor, and it's very minorly less effective against shields. Slash does a ton of damage still. That's still very relevant, and I feel like it's still going to be great, even if it has to dig through shields before it can kill the enemies underneath the shields, as it were. Also, toxin damage no longer has a bonus damage to armor, but it still bypasses shields completely. It will completely ignore shields as it does now. So toxin and the toxin procs you get from gas, for example, are still going to ignore all shields. So if they become super important, we will all just use toxin damage to deal with that. Then there are some player changes to shields, health, and armor, and that is that we are now going to have a unique health, armor, and shield type that is neutral except for shields. Our shields are going to have a 25% inherent damage reduction on them, which is an interesting way to buff shields. Like, it's potentially going to see change. They talked about it maybe not being like the final number on the damage reduction, But it's very interesting that we are going to be receiving kind of neutral all things, and this is going to be a buff and a nerf in a bunch of different cases, essentially. Certain damage types we were very resilient against with our ferrite armor that we have, but it's essentially just going to like even things out so that damage types just don't have like a weird effect on Tenno. Like everything's pretty equal, like just doing damage to us. It's just the status effects on us that are going to be the thing that more so matters. And this will generally, I think, make us tougher in the long run, especially considering the shield damage reduction, especially for a Warframe like Hildryn, who has a lot of shields. This will be a large buff to her, even though survivability is maybe not what Hildryn needed until we get to another part of this workshop. So those are the changes coming to armor, health, and shields. And then besides that, infested damage is going to go up, which is fine. Infested are not a threat right now. Just giving them some increased damage is reasonable. Also, on a small note, the AI aimbot type situation that we've been talking about a lot since they made the invisibility change, basically they are generally nerfing enemy accuracy with a pretty large range, and it's going to be more so affected by how fast you are moving. It already was affected by how fast you were moving, but it seems like this is going to be more of a change for just generally like getting to a high level and not needing to be completely fucking invulnerable. And as long as you can move fast, you'll have a much better time surviving, especially with the shield gate being added, because if you get the enemy's percent chance to hit you down to like below 10% via moving fast and you get hit once and that would kill you, now we'll have a shield gate to prevent that. So that will be good. Then shield gating, of course, that is in this section here. It's pretty much everything that I've gone over so far. Weak points on Corpus are going to ignore the shield gating, but on non-weak points, they are going to have a 5% damage spillover. In most cases, in most levels, for most high-end builds, that's still just going to kill the enemies that you're usually encountering, but we'll see what it all susses out to be, essentially. Also, I just want to note this because I kind of zooped this into the damage category before we start talking about arcanes and things. Self-damage is being completely removed, and I actually want to go and show that real quick. Self-damage is changing to be a kind of brand new thing, in that you will no longer just die from self-damage. You won't blow your ass up. Instead, you are going to get a blow back. And was shown here, you see this backflip that gets done? It was described on Devstream that is a tech. So whenever you would get knocked back by this, you like hit a button to roll out of it and stay standing. The thing that I really want to know about this is if this is going to apply to other knockbacks in Warframe, because for a long time I've wanted things like the heavy gunner or like ground slam, and things like profit takers, big walls, and those knockbacks and stuff. If you can tech knockbacks or knockbacks and knockdowns to not put you on the ground for like a million seconds and then you just fucking die, that would add a level to the game that like makes knockdowns fun and they feel interactive. Because if you end up on the ground laying there for 3 seconds, you did that to yourself by failing the tech. I really want that to be the case, and I would really love to see this applied to many things. So let's hope that happens, because I feel like that would be a great improvement. And obviously, for explosive weapons, this is wonderful. You are no longer just going to be just restricted to be like, I'm Revenant because I don't want to kill myself. So that'll be very nice. Also, this resulted in a change with weapons with stagger getting an approximately 20% damage buff. Any weapons with AoE have a 50% radial damage fall off from central impact. So that means that basically enemies on the edges of your explosions are going to take less damage, but the 20% buff should compensate for that. And usually explosive weapons that we would actually be using, like the Brahma, will fairly reasonably overkill enemies with their explosions as it stands right now. So this is not going to be as large of a nerf as it maybe sounds from it saying 50% radial damage fall off, because that is a slow fall off. Like at the edge of damage, it's going to be considerably less damage. But if they're in like the middle of your explosive radius, it's still going to be more than enough damage to kill them because of the 20% general buff in damage of these weapons. So that stuff is all fine. Now then, let's talk about 2 things real quick that are just minor notes, and then we can talk about arcanes, because the arcane stuff, there's a lot. Excavator health is now going to scale, so excavation missions where the Lich is invading are no longer going to be the most gigantic pain in the ass ever, and Sentinels are going to share mods with you now. So if you have a primary weapon with a Serration equipped, you no longer need to have a second leveled Serration for your Sentinel to be able to use Serration. So that's great. Makes that way less of a pain in the ass. Those are two changes that we've been asking for a long, long time, and we are getting both of them. Now let's talk about Arcanes. Okay, so Arcanes are receiving some general changes. They are no longer going to double stack, and some of them are receiving a sort of cooldown where they cannot refresh. And on this, there's going to be the new Scarlet Spear operation, which is the squad link operation that we're going to be getting soon that we talked about before. And Little Duck is going to have Arcanes in that event as the person handing out rewards. For that, though, Arcanes are receiving some changes. Because there's no double stacking, they can now go to rank 5, which is rank 5 is the equivalent of having 2 full sets, 20 Arcanes, and the stats are as such. I'm not going to go over all of these. Instead, I have a hit list. This is the hit list for Arcanes. This is just the important Arcanes and going over them and what's happened to them. So, first and foremost, we have Aegis. Aegis is dead. This is a dead Arcane. This was providing flat shields regenerated. It was providing, I believe it was 60 per second. And it was at a higher chance than this. Now this is just giving us shield recharge, which is a not good stat. It's a bad stat, and it's only 30% of it. This not giving us a flat amount of shields restored to us is absolutely dreadful. This Arcane is fucking dead. So there's that. Moving on, we have Avenger. Avenger seems fine. Avenger was one that you would want to stack, and you would get up to 60% critical chance. And in general, the general buffage that they wanted to do on these is to basically make one full set of a rank 5 Arcane equal about 1.5 of like what you were getting before. Avenger follows that to a T. Get a 21% chance whenever you're damaged to get 45% raw critical chance for 12 seconds. That's super fine. Getting a rank 5 Avenger is still going to be plenty nice on a variety of things. Like especially if you're using the new core or anything like that, this can be super great on that and still allow you to use another Arcane. I think Avenger will be just fine in the end, so that's good. And then we have Arcane Consequence being the next actually important one. This is a larger parkour velocity buff. I, in general, think that Consequence was one that you would want to run because being faster is nice, especially when it's just on headshot and it's a 100% chance, which is a thing that we can perform quite often. But 2 sets of Arcane Consequence was usually not what I wanted to do. I usually wanted to have a different kind of Warframe specific mod and then also Consequence to make me go fast. So this in general I think is going to be just a raw buff to Consequence to get that nice 60% parkour velocity to make us extremely fast. So that's going to be super nice. With that, let's talk about Energize. So the wording on Energize is it's a thing. We don't know what it means because this is a 60% chance to replenish energy to nearby allies. Okay, this is just the wording of Energize as it stands now. But the point where we get some weird shit is this. Added duration and cooldown added cannot retrigger while active. So here's the important thing. We don't have enough detail on what this means. Added duration, if this is a duration, as in like it's an overtime energy gain, that means this will be nerfed to no longer work with channeling abilities, which is a enormous nerf to Energize because that was one of the reasons it was actually run. And if this has a cooldown that is like, let's say above 10 seconds, that's like the absolute max, then it's going to just be better for you to never rely on Energize, and it won't be worth the farm, especially not for 20 motherfucking Energize. Like 20 Energize is it's a lot. That's a lot of Energize. And that is extremely hard to acquire. This is a massive nerf to Energize. Will it still be good? As long as they don't change it giving you energy, it'll probably still be fine. But whether or not it'll be worth being the rarest Arcane in Warframe, it remains to be seen. If it still works with channeled abilities, I'm sure there are still Warframes that are going to want to use it. But it's tough. It's tough to know whether or not this is going to be a thing that we continue to use in the future. I hope it still works with channeling, and I hope this cooldown is not like some absolute nonsense. Because let me tell you right now, if you want Energize to never be used ever again, you just slap a 60-second cooldown on it, and it will never be heard from ever again. It'll be an absolute piece of shit garbage if the cooldown is some long shit like that. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out, but that is a very platinum intense item currently, that might be getting nerfed into the fucking ground. Plain and simple. Moving on, we have Grace. Grace, the only thing that has really changed here is that it is exactly equivalent to a 1.5 of one set of Grace at rank 5. So it's a 9% chance, 6% health generation, 9 seconds. That's all fine and good. The main nerf here is that it cannot re-trigger while it is active. So it can't refresh back to 9 seconds until those 9 seconds are over. Will this make Grace unusable? No. Will this nerf Grace? Yes. Plain and simple, it will nerf Grace. You'll probably still definitely be using this on Inaros, if you have it, of course, because like it's just a nice passive health regeneration. And on other Warframes like Grendel or Nidus, it's still going to be a nice thing to slot in there. But it's simply not going to just not be as good. And it's, you know, it's on health damaged, so it's going to be nice on like the really health chunky Warframes like those 3, and then kind of not anywhere else, I think. But that's pretty much how it's been for a while. Now, let's talk about one that don't make no fucking sense to me, and that's Arcane Guardian. Arcane Guardian at rank 5 has a 15% chance for 600 armor for 30 seconds. That means that you have to put in an additional 10 arcanes, and you lose 5% chance for this to happen, and you don't gain any armor from where you are now. So, to equivalently get 1 Guardian, or not even, you don't even get up to what we have in one set of Guardian now, which would be rank 3, from the new Guardian, because the chance is lower and the armor is the same. So, Guardian is receiving a massive, massive nerf, except for it is 30 seconds now, which has never been the important thing about Guardian. This is mind-boggling to me. I do not understand why this would get nerfed. Guardian, for a long, long time, has just been the Arcane where it's like, oh yeah, you could slot that into pretty much whatever Warframe, and it's decent. And I do not feel that an Arcane that is like considered to be like a decent thing you can throw on whatever should be up for a nerf in any way, shape, or form. Because the whole thing about Guardian was just that it was pretty easy to get. So if you have it, might as well throw it in. It doesn't do any harm. So that is terrible. Absolutely dreadful that this is getting such a gigantic nerf. That is really unfortunate. Also, just as a small note, we're getting there's some unreleased ones in here for the damage resistances. So we're getting basically the rest of the damage resistance arcanes. Also, one full set of any of the damage arcanes is going to get us to 102% chance to resist a heat damage effect. So you're only going to need like one set of the one that resists radiation, and like one set of the one that resists magnetic and stuff to fully be able to resist those effects. So that's nice, because it means technically you'd be able to resist 2 effects if that ever becomes relevant. But being able to resist all magnetic effects is going to be super nice for some Warframes for sure. And I'm sure in some events it will come up. So there's that. Besides that, we have Arcane Precision. Arcane Precision is receiving an interesting change to be more like Pistolier, which is an arcane that I had forgot about. This is on any headshot, 10% chance for 300% ammo efficiency for 18 seconds. So I actually don't really know how it works on Pistolier. And I know that Pistolier makes it so you use no ammo whenever you are shooting your gun. But will this make it so that ammo gets put back in your magazine whenever it triggers? Because this can't re-trigger while active, but it lasts 18 seconds. So I'll be really curious to see whether or not this puts ammo back in your gun, because I don't think Pistolier does, but it'll be interesting to see. I'm curious what 300% ammo efficiency is going to do outside of for weapons that use more than 1 bullet per shot. That's going to be like, you'll use less bullets per shot, I would presume. So there's that. Moving on, that is Arcane Precision. Strike was buffed, and also I'm just going over the good arcanes. Strike was buffed as you might imagine it would be. You'd only usually run one like set of Arcane Strike on a build. So this is just a raw buff for Strike. Is just going to be good things there. Tanker is an as normal buff. This is going to be 1800 armor for 24 seconds. It cannot retrigger while it's active. That part doesn't really matter. 24 seconds is a plenty large window, and you can retrigger it very easily. So no big deal there. And this is going to be more armor for one slot on Rhino, but less overall because you can no longer stack these arcanes. So you're going to be less than the 2400 that you were at before for stacking 2 arcane tankers. But this is only taking up one of your slots. So in general, this is, I think, a buff for Rhino, just because you're getting a whole another arcane slot to really use. You're not needing to use double tanker, but you also didn't need to use double tanker before. Using double tanker was more of a huge meme, so it's kind of a nerf to the overall memes of using Rhino that way. But in a second, we'll get to even further memes that you can use now. Besides that, we have Velocity. Velocity, of course, is used on Mesa. You'd only ever run one set because you wanted your other arcane slot. So this is a raw buff for Mesa, just to get even more fire rate on your pistols and all that business, because it's just on critical hit. Very easy for Mesa to activate, and it affects her 4. So that's great. And then Arcane Ultimatum. Sorry, I jumped over it. Arcane Ultimatum, this is the extra meme you can do on Rhino now, because this is an additional 1200 armor. You can get 3000 armor as opposed to the previous cap on 2400 if you are combining Tanker and Ultimatum, which is a thing you can do. Ultimatum traditionally is much harder to activate because it is only on Finisher. And it's 100% chance on Finisher, so there's that. But getting this 1200 armor on Finisher will allow you to get 3000 extra armor from your arcanes instead of the 2400 we've been working with currently. So technically, the Rhino memes are bigger. They are just harder to perform because you would want to include Ultimatum if you are going that route now. Also, Victory got buffed. So Victory is kind of an old hat arcane that I used to use a ton, and this is on headshot kills, 75% chance for 3% health regeneration for 9 seconds. I think in general, this is what Inaros is going to slot into his slot where he can no longer use a second copy of Grace. And this is going to provide enough health regeneration for you on a pretty constant basis. 75% chance for 3% health regeneration is very good. Also, headshot kills can be gained from your melee weapons. So if you're using something like the Reaper Prime or whatever else, you're going to trigger this pretty often. So the healing is going to be pretty consistent between a full set of this and a full set of Grace, I think. So Inaros is going to lose much, much less than you would usually think because Victory is not going to be trash garbage. Also, very worth noting, Arcane Victory is re-triggerable. So if you're killing enough enemies with headshots, it's very, very possible that you just have this kind of running all the time, which will be very solid. So there is all of that stuff in terms of arcanes. And now let's talk about the critical status. There's the also, just to throw a note on it. Wait 1 second. Just to throw a note on it. The Titania changes and the Vauban tweak are coming. Vauban is getting more armor. This, I think, does not matter at all. And then the Titania changes are just what we've gone over in the past. These are going to be solid for her, and I can't wait to test them when they come out. Especially because Titania Prime is very much on the horizon. Also, there's a reward cleanup. They're getting rid of the low end of a lot of rewards, and that's going to be nice for early game players because it's mostly going to be changes on Earth and things for that to be improved. Also, things that we've gone over, the item labels is going to be on by default. That's good stuff. There are 100 extra store blueprints that are going to be available. So if you don't want to build 10 at a time or whatever, you can now build 100 at a time. So that's going to be great. And they build very quickly and all that good business. Sharing Sentinel mods, as we went over, greater than 100% status having meaning. So this is essentially critical status. This is above 100% status. What is this going to do? Well, first and foremost, the main thing they talked about is that they're going to nerf the fuck out of shotguns. They are going to nerf the absolute motherfuck out of shotguns because the way 100% status on shotguns works, which if you don't know how that works, you can go watch my Tigris Prime video that is still up to date on how shotgun status works currently, but not how it's going to work in the future. Basically, they are taking all of the shotguns that were good because they had 100% status capabilities, like the Tigris Prime and the Kuva Comb and all that stuff, and they are nerfing them into the fucking ground. Because they are no longer going to have a 100% chance for each pellet to individually proc a status because they're making these status changes. So, first and foremost, that shit's getting nerfed. Any shotgun that was not utilizing 100% status, though, such as the Vacor Heck, for example, is getting buffed because all shotgun status chances are getting tripled because they are doing the 100% nerf. But for weapons like the Tigris Prime and the Comb, that's not going to matter because they're just not going to get back to that height where they were 100% champ procking on all of their pellets. That's just not going to happen. you're always going to have some chance to do the thing. With that, the other thing that I'd like to talk about is, well, there's status chance buffs coming, so there's, like, these mods are going to be a little bit better. Not that it'll matter, because, like, the shotgun one would have mattered whenever shotguns needed to get to 100%, not so much now. But double procking is also going to be a thing. We don't really know what that looks like here, just that you'll be able to proc 2 statuses at once, so you'll have 100% chance to proc a status, and then if you're at like 130%, you have a 30% chance to proc a second status, and they can be the same status. And as it says here, there's an example here, which is if you get a duplicate status effect on an enemy, AoE knockdown would occur on a second impact status on an enemy already inflicted with one. So that is like it's a buff for proccing status multiple times on an enemy. It'll be interesting to see what effects this gets, and whether or not over 100% status is actually going to be like a real build that we do, because the effects are going to have to be pretty good for a lot of the different elementals for that to be a thing that we build for. Anyway, moving on, we just kind of have one last thing here, and that is, well, there's grenade markers. So grenades are going to be marked like how you would want, with like an actual waypoint, so you know where they are, so you don't like just have no fucking idea like where they're coming from. And they don't just blow you up because you hear the beeping, but you have no idea where it landed. Also, you can shoot them to blow them up preemptively, so that's very nice. And there are going to be Kuvalich murmur changes. So for lessening the murmur farm, if you're farming in a group and one of your allies does they try on their Kuvalich to kill it, they do the guess, as it were. That is going to be giving you murmurs once again. So this, whenever you're farming in a group, greatly increases the amount of murmurs you're going to be getting, because you're getting that extra boost whenever your ally runs into their lich. So that is going to greatly cut down, as long as you're farming in a group, on the amount of like murmurs and encounters and stuff that you need. So that's going to be great, and it's going to make farming much, much faster. So that's fantastic. That's pretty much going to do it. There's still the deferred rendering and HDR stuff coming up. And also FOV is finally being increased. It's currently at a max of 78. It's going up to a max of 90. And this is in the Orbiter, so keep in mind that the Orbiter has a more constrained FOV in general. They showed this off in mission, and it was actually very, very nice. I personally don't think I'm going to go to 90. I'm probably going to be at like 86, because 90 is like maybe just a tad overdoing it. But a tad overdoing it is where I would love this in-game option to be, because if it's higher than I want to put it, that means I can simply set it lower, whereas currently it is much lower than I want. So that's going to be very nice. There are a number of good changes here, and there's a lot to be worried about. If you're someone that uses Arcanes, there's a lot of Arcane changes happening. There's a lot of ups, a lot of downs. What's going to happen with Energize and all this other stuff is greatly in flux. And if you were someone who was just slapping Guardian on everything, that is obviously going to be not good for you. And obviously, if you're a big shotgun user of like the comb or anything like that, that is a massive fucking nerf that is going to ruin that weapon probably. So there's all that stuff, but there's also like a lot of good stuff in here. Like a lot of the Arcane changes that they're making, like I understand kind of the reasoning for it, like why they don't want you to stack Arcanes anymore, to kind of give you a little bit more build variety. That seems reasonable. The armor, health, and shields changes seem like they are generally very good. I don't know if shield gating on enemies is going to be fun. Sounds like it could be just more of a pain in the ass than anything else. Shield gating on us, though, that's going to be fantastic. It's going to reduce a lot of one-shots and make a lot more lower-end Warframes viable, because they won't just explode if they get touched by a feather. And the self-damage changes are incredible, especially if that knockdown tech becomes a thing that you can do to any knockdown in the game. That's just a huge plus in terms of just us being more Space Ninja-y, not just getting knocked on our ass and not being able to do anything about it, like just being able to react to a knockdown and kind of neutralize it, but still have to go through an animation for it that's very fast. All that stuff's going to be really nice. I think that there's a lot of good here. It's easy to focus on the bad stuff, like Energize definitely being nerfed, and like Arcane changes in general, and how like the shotguns are going to get nerfed into the ground. But there is a lot of good here. Hopefully we see a bunch of Railjack changes to kind of go along with this to make Railjack fun, because that just really badly needs to happen, because we're about to get an event with Railjack, and if Railjack sucks, then it's going to be it's going to be no fun at all, just plain and simple. But yeah, that is the Devstream 139 breakdown. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I am going to be streaming over on twitch.tv/Brozime, so come over there and hang out. Also, I streamed the Devstream and then went over the notes kind of more in depth, looking at each one and like had my initial reactions to that stuff. If you guys would like me to upload that as like its own thing here on the channel, let me know. But that can also be seen over at twitch.tv/Brozime as of current. Hope to see you guys there, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.